I bought her a plane ticket because she said she'd never seen the ocean before. I booked the resort because she sent me voice messages saying, "I just want time with you, sir." I waited at the hotel lobby with flowers in my hand. She checked in 3 hours later, with a French guy, and they walked past me like I was nobody. "Russell, baby, I have never been to Palawan," Neri whispered through the phone, her voice soft like honey dripping slow. "My friends say it's like paradise, but I am just a simple girl from General Santos. I cannot afford such things." I was sitting in my kitchen in Des Moines, looking out at snow-covered cornfields, and her words made me feel like I could give her the world. "What if I sent you there?" I asked. "What if we went together?" The silence on her end lasted forever. Then she laughed, that musical laugh that always made my chest tight. "Sir, you would do that for me? Really? You would take me to see the ocean?" I was already pulling up airline websites. "Neri, this isn't just a vacation. I want to build something real with you, something that lasts." Her voice cracked a little when she said, "I'm yours, sir. Always." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The resort I picked wasn't fancy, mid-range, clean, right on the water like she wanted. I called her while booking it and said, "Look, sweetheart, I know we've been talking for over a year now, but this trip means something to me. This is us stepping into the real world together." She giggled. "Russell, baby, you make me so happy. I cannot wait to hold your hand on the beach." I sent her the confirmation email that night. Flight from General Santos to Puerto Princesa. Round trip. Her name on the ticket. Mine too. "We leave Friday morning," I told her. "I'll be there Thursday night." She said, "I cannot sleep. I am too excited." Neither could I. Thursday came. I was at the airport in Manila, connecting from Iowa, when my phone buzzed. "Sir, my flight time changed last minute. Don't wait for me at the airport. Just go to the hotel. I will meet you there." I stared at that message for 5 minutes. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it. Maybe flights get changed all the time in the Philippines. I didn't know. I texted back, "Okay, baby. I'll be waiting in the lobby." She sent back a heart emoji. That should have been enough. It wasn't, but I told myself it was. I got to the resort around 3 in the afternoon, checked in, walked to the lobby with a bouquet of Sampaguita flowers I'd bought from a vendor outside. The receptionist, a young Filipino woman with kind eyes, asked if I needed help. "I'm waiting for someone," I said. "She should be here soon." An hour passed, then 2. The flowers started wilting in my hands. I kept checking my phone. Nothing. At hour 3, I called her, straight to voicemail. "Neri, where are you? I'm here waiting." I must have looked pathetic sitting there, a 66-year-old American man clutching dead flowers in a lobby full of happy couples. That's when I heard her laugh. The same laugh that had been the soundtrack to my loneliness for 13 months. I looked up, and there she was, walking through the front door. But she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, white, French accent when he spoke to the receptionist. His arm was around her waist like it belonged there, like they were the couple. She saw me and her face didn't show surprise. It showed annoyance, like I was an unexpected complication in her day. "Russell," she said, walking over with that man still attached to her side. "I didn't expect you to be here so early." I stood up so fast the flowers scattered on the marble floor. "Who is he?" The words came out harder than I intended. The man looked at me, then at her, then said something in French that sounded like a question. Neri touched his arm and said, "It's okay, Julian. This is Russell. I told you about him. Told him about me." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "Neri, what's going on here?" She sighed like I was being difficult. "Russell, baby, this is Julian. He's just a friend I met online. He helped me book my flight when yours got complicated." I stared at her. "My flight got complicated? I booked your flight. I sent you the confirmation." She laughed. That same musical laugh that used to make me feel chosen. Now it made me feel sick. "Sir, you are being dramatic. Julian is just helping me. He knows Palawan better than us." Julian stepped forward and extended his hand like we were being introduced at a dinner party. "Nice to meet you, Russell. Neri has told me much about you." His English was perfect, educated. He was maybe 35, fit, wearing a tank top that showed off arms I'd never have again. I didn't shake his hand. "Helped you book your flight?" I repeated, looking at Neri. "I sent you $1,500 for that ticket." Her smile flickered for just a second. Russell, money is not everything. Julian understands the local travel better. He made sure I got here safe. Julian nodded like this all made perfect sense. The Philippines can be tricky for travelers. I have been coming here for years. I wanted to ask him how many young Filipino women he'd helped travel, but my throat felt like sandpaper. Where are you staying? I asked him. He looked at Neri. She looked at the floor. Well, she said, we thought it would be easier if we all stayed close. Julian booked a room here too. The lobby suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of other people's happiness. Here, at this resort? She nodded. It's a big place, Russell. We don't have to see each other. But you came with him, I thought. You walked in with his arm around you like I was just some stranger who happened to be holding flowers. Neri, I said, and my voice cracked like a teenager's. Can we talk alone? Julian said something in French again. She responded in what sounded like Bisaya. They both laughed. I stood there like an idiot, not understanding either language but understanding everything. Sir, she said, turning back to me with that patient smile she used when explaining English grammar to her students. There is nothing to talk about that Julian cannot hear. We are all adults here. Adults. Right. I was 66 years old, standing in a hotel lobby in the Philippines, holding dead flowers while a 25-year-old woman I'd been sending money to for over a year told me her new boyfriend could hear whatever I had to say. I need to check in, Julian said, walking toward the front desk. I will see you both later. He kissed her cheek before he left. She didn't pull away. I watched my hands shake as I bent down to pick up the scattered flowers. Russell, baby, she said softly, like she was talking to a child. Why are you upset? I am here, just like I promised. Just like she promised. But she wasn't here the way she promised. She was here with someone else, someone who kissed her cheek, and spoke to her in languages I didn't know, and looked at me like I was an old man who didn't understand how the world worked. Maybe I didn't. You said you were mine. I whispered. You said always. She touched my arm, and for a second I felt that familiar jolt of hope. I am here with you now. Isn't that enough? No, I wanted to scream. It wasn't enough. It wasn't anything close to enough. But instead I just stood there, holding dying flowers, wondering how love could feel so much like drowning. I met Neri in March 2020, when the whole world was locked inside, and loneliness felt like a permanent condition. I'd been divorced for 3 years, and my kids lived in California. My house in Des Moines felt bigger every day. That's when I downloaded that language app. I told myself I wanted to learn Tagalog, maybe visit the Philippines someday. What I really wanted was to talk to someone who didn't know how badly my marriage had failed or how quiet my life had become. Neri was one of the English tutors on the app. Her profile said she was 24, from General Santos City, studying education. Her photo showed a young woman with long black hair and a smile that looked genuine, not like the filtered perfection I'd been seeing everywhere else. Our first conversation was about grammar. Why do Americans say I could care less when they mean they couldn't care less? She asked. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Because we're terrible at our own language. I said, that's why you're the teacher. She giggled. I like you already, Russell. You are honest. Honest. That word stuck with me. When was the last time someone had called me honest? My ex-wife used to say I was boring. My coworkers said I was reliable. But honest? That felt like something worth being. We talked for an hour that first day, about words, about weather, about nothing and everything. When she said goodbye, she added, talk to you tomorrow, okay? It wasn't a question. It was a promise. The next call lasted 2 hours. Tell me about Iowa, she said. I want to know where you live. So I told her about cornfields and county fairs and winters that lasted forever. She told me about typhoons and jeepneys and her family's small house near the coast. My father drives a tricycle, she said. My mother sells food at the market. We are not rich, but we are happy. I envied that. I had money but felt broke in every way that mattered. What about you, Russell? Are you happy? The question hit me like a punch. I'm trying to be, I said. Some days are better than others. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I hope I can make your days better. She did. God help me, she did. By the 4th week, she was calling me Russell baby. By the 2nd month, she was calling me every night before bed. Sleep well, mahal ko. she'd whisper. I looked up what Mahal Ko meant. My love, my dear one. The words hit me like a drug. I've never felt needed like this, I told her one night. My ex-wife used to say I was too boring, too predictable. But you make me feel like I matter. Neri's voice got soft. Russell, baby, you do matter. You matter to me. That's when I sent her the first gift. A smartphone to replace the old one she said kept cutting out during our calls. I cannot accept this, she said when I told her. It is too expensive. But I insisted. I want to hear your voice clearly, I said. You're important to me. The phone became a tablet. The tablet became money for her school fees. The school fees became rent when her family got behind. Each time, she'd protest. Sir, I cannot ask you for this. Each time, I'd say, you're not asking. I'm offering. Because that's what people do when they love someone, right? They help. They provide. They show up. You have the biggest heart, she'd tell me. Filipino men are not like you. They take and take. But you give. I felt proud when she said that. Chosen. Like maybe my age didn't matter. Like maybe the distance didn't matter. Like maybe love could happen to someone like me after all. The calls became daily. Morning coffee for me, late evening for her. How was your day, Mahal? She'd ask, and I'd tell her about my retirement routine, about the books I was reading, about how empty the house felt. She'd tell me about her students, about her dreams of getting a teaching degree, about wanting to see the ocean someday. I have lived in Mindanao my whole life, she said, but I have never been to the beach. Can you believe that? I couldn't. Someday I'll take you, I said without thinking. Someday, we'll go together. Her silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, you would really do that for me, Russell, baby? You would bring me to see the ocean? I would have brought her to see the moon if she'd asked. Of course, I said. Of course I would. I couldn't sleep that first night. I kept replaying her walking into the lobby with his arm around her waist. The way she looked annoyed to see me instead of hovers out again, happy. The way they spoke in languages I didn't understand while I stood there holding dead flowers like an idiot. Around 6 in the morning, I got dressed and went to the front desk. The same receptionist from yesterday was there. She looked up with that professional smile they train hotel workers to wear. Good morning, sir. How can I help you? My voice came out rougher than I intended. I need to know what room Neri Dela Cruz checked into yesterday. The woman's smile flickered. Sir, I cannot give out room information for privacy reasons. I pulled out my phone and showed her the booking confirmation. I paid for this reservation. Her name is on it because I added her, but I'm the one who booked it. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Her expression changed to something that might have been pity. Sir, that is room 314. But I was already walking toward the elevator. The hallway on the 3rd floor smelled like hibiscus and something else I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. My own fear. I stood outside room 314 for 5 minutes before I knocked. Soft at first, then harder. The door opened, and there was Neri in a bright blue bikini top and white shorts that showed more skin than I'd ever seen from her during our video calls. Her hair was wet like she'd just come from swimming. She looked at me and sighed. Russell, what are you doing here? Behind her, I heard a man's voice calling something in French. Julian. I came to talk to you, I said, alone. She didn't move from the doorway. You are being dramatic, sir. There is nothing to talk about. Julian appeared behind her, shirtless, holding a towel. He said something to her in French. She laughed and replied in what sounded like French too. When did she learn French? Get out, I said, looking at him. Both of you, get out of my room. Neri's eyes flashed. Your room? My name is on the reservation too, remember? You put it there. She was right. I had put her name on the reservation. So she could check in if she arrived before me. So she'd feel welcome. So she'd know this was our room, our trip, our chance to be together for real. You know what I meant when I booked this? I said, this was supposed to be for us. Julian said something else in French. Neri nodded and turned back to me. Russell, baby, you cannot control where I stay. I am a grown woman. A grown woman. 25 years old, standing in a room I paid for. Defending a man I'd never heard of until yesterday while wearing a bikini that probably cost more than I'd sent her for her last emergency. How long have you known him? I asked. She shrugged. A few months. We met online. Like you and me. But not like you and me, because you never called me baby or sent me photos or told me I was the only one. Julian walked past her and sat on the bed I'd imagined sharing with her. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like he belonged there. Like I was the intruder. I think there is some confusion here, he said to me. Nuri and I planned this trip together. We saved money for months. Saved money. I almost laughed. I'd sent her over $11,000 in the past year. For phone bills and school fees and family emergencies and medical expenses, and now apparently for a trip she was taking with someone else. Is that true? Is that true? I asked her. Did you save money for this trip? She looked at Julian, then at me. Russell, you sent me money for many things. I used some of it for this trip, yes. But Julian helped too. He understands travel better than you. I stood there in the doorway of a room I'd booked, looking at a woman I'd supported for over a year, listening to her explain why another man was better qualified to help her spend my money. I turned and left without saying goodbye. No yelling, no crying, no demanding explanations or promises or apologies. I just walked away, my footsteps echoing in that hibiscus-scented hallway, while behind me I heard them speaking in French again. The elevator ride down felt like falling through space. In the lobby, that same receptionist looked up as I passed. Her expression was different now. Knowing. Sad. Like this wasn't the first time she'd seen an older foreign man learn hard truths about younger local women. I nodded at her and kept walking, out of the hotel, onto the beach where the morning sun was turning the water gold and couples were already laying out towels and planning their perfect days together. I found a small cafe down the beach from the resort, the kind of place that serves instant coffee and fried rice to locals, not tourists. The owner, an elderly Filipino woman, looked surprised when I sat down, but she poured me coffee without asking questions. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I'd never added up all the money before. I'd sent it in pieces, emergency by emergency, need by need. But sitting there in that cafe with the ocean 20 feet away and my heart in my throat, I started counting. Phone, $400. Tablet, $600. School fees, $1,500. Rent assistance, $800. Medical expenses for her mother, $1,200. Emergency flight home when her grandmother died, $900. More school fees, $1,000. Books and supplies, $300. Family food money during lockdown, $2,000. The numbers kept climbing. $11,400, over 13 months. Almost $900 a month to a woman who was now speaking French with another man in a room I'd paid for. I scrolled back through our message history, looking for lies I'd missed, signs I'd ignored. Russell baby, my phone is broken again. I cannot call you without a new one. Sir, my school is asking for fees or I cannot continue my degree. Mahal, my mother is sick. The hospital wants money up front. Russell, our landlord is threatening to evict us. I am so scared. Every message had felt urgent, desperate, real. Her voice would crack when she explained each crisis. She'd cry sometimes. I hate asking you for help, she'd say. But I have no one else to turn to, and I'd felt needed, important, like a hero riding in to save the day. Like the money proved something, like it made me worthy of love. But sitting there in that cafe, I realized I didn't even know her real last name. I'd been sending money to Nuri de la Cruz, but was that even her real name? I'd never seen official documents, never met her family despite hearing about them constantly, never talked to her friends or coworkers despite her saying they all wanted to meet me. I opened Facebook and searched for her name. Nothing. Searched for the school she claimed to attend. It existed, but I couldn't find her in any student photos or class listings. I searched for the English tutoring company she said she worked for. Their website showed a dozen tutors. She wasn't one of them. My coffee was getting cold, but I couldn't stop searching. Looking for proof that Nuri de la Cruz was a real person with a real life who had really needed my help. Instead, I found shadows and gaps and questions I'd been too lonely to ask. You okay, sir? The cafe owner was standing next to my table, looking concerned. I realized I'd been sitting there for over an hour, staring at my phone with tears running down my face. Just getting some bad news, I said. She nodded and refilled my coffee without being asked. Sometimes life is hard, she said, But tomorrow is always different. Tomorrow. Right. I had a return flight in 3 days. Back to Des Moines, back to my empty house, back to a life that would feel even emptier now that I knew what hope looked like when it died. $11,400. That could have been a new car, a cruise, a down payment on a smaller house, college funds for my grandkids. Instead, it was a French-speaking stranger sitting on a bed I'd paid for, while the woman I loved explained why he understood her better than I did. I paid for my coffee and walked back toward the resort, not to go inside, but to see if they were still there. They were. On the beach. She was lying on a towel in that blue bikini, and he was rubbing sunscreen on her back. His hands moved slowly, carefully, like he was memorizing her skin. She was laughing at something he said. The same laugh that used to make my day when she'd call me from General Santos. But this laugh was different. Lighter, more genuine. Like maybe she'd never really laughed like that with me. Like maybe all those late-night conversations and sweet words and promises had been work for her. A job she was good at. A performance that paid well enough to afford trips to Palawan with men who were younger and stronger and better at understanding travel than some retired engineer from Iowa who thought love could be bought with Western Union transfers and good intentions. I saw them arguing the next evening at the beachside bar. I was walking back from dinner at that same local cafe, trying to avoid the resort's restaurant where happy couples ate candlelit meals and planned their futures together. The bar was crowded with tourists, but their voices carried over the music. Julian was gesturing with his hands, speaking rapid French. Neri was responding in English, her voice sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "You didn't tell me he would be here," Julian said, switching to English. "You said this was our trip." Neri looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was listening. I ducked behind a palm tree like a teenager hiding from his parents. "Julian, please keep your voice down. Russell is just confused. He will go home soon. Just confused." Like my heartbreak was a minor inconvenience that would resolve itself if they waited long enough. Julian threw his hands up and stormed off toward the beach. Neri called after him in French, but he kept walking. She sat alone at the bar, stirring her drink and looking more upset than I'd seen her since she arrived. Part of me wanted to walk over, to ask if she was okay, to be the shoulder she could cry on. But another part of me, a smarter part, stayed hidden and watched. After 10 minutes, she pulled out her phone and made a call. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her voice had that same sweet, apologetic tone I remembered from our conversations when she needed money. The tone that made you want to fix whatever was wrong. The tone that made you feel special for being the one she called. I found Julian an hour later, sitting alone on the beach about a mile from the resort. He was smoking a cigarette and staring at the water. I walked up slowly, giving him time to see me coming. "Mind if I sit?" He looked up, surprised. "Russell, right? Neri's friend?" "Friend." "Right. That's me," I said, settling into the sand next to him. "Rough night?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You could say that." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the waves. Then, without looking at me, he said, "How long have you known her?" I thought about how to answer that. 13 months. We met online. She was my English teacher. He nodded slowly. She told me she was single when we started talking. Said she'd never had a serious relationship with a foreigner before. The words hit me like a slap. "When did you start talking?" I asked. "October," he said. "Last October. October. We'd been together for 7 months by then. She was calling me every night, sending me photos, telling me she loved me." "Did you send her money?" I asked. Julian looked at me sharply. "Why?" I pulled out my phone and showed him my banking app, the transfers to Neri. $11,400 over 13 months. His face went white. "Murde," he whispered. "How much?" I asked. €500, he said, "for her ticket. She said her family couldn't afford it. €500. About $550. I'd sent her $1,500 for that same ticket. Did she tell you she loved you?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "Every day," he finally said. "Every morning, she would text me good morning, mon amour. Every night, bon nuit, my love. My love. Mahal ko. Mon amour." How many languages was she saying it in? How many men were hearing those same words and believing they were special? "She has 2 phones, Julian said suddenly. "I saw her earlier, taking a call on a different phone than the one she uses with me. 2 phones, of course, maybe more. How many Russell babies were there? How many Mon Amours? How many lonely middle-aged men sending money to emergency accounts while she planned trips with younger lovers? I sent her money for this trip too, Julian continued. She said she needed help booking it because she'd never traveled alone before. Never traveled alone. But she wasn't traveling alone, she was traveling with him. While I sat at home in Iowa, believing I was booking a romantic getaway for 2. What are we going to do? He asked. I looked at him, this handsome younger man who'd been played just like me, and I started laughing, not happy laughter. The kind of laughter that comes when pain gets so big it can't fit in your chest anymore. We're going to do nothing, I said. We're going to let her have her vacation with our money and our trust and our stupid, lonely hearts. And then we're going to go home and try to forget we ever believed in fairy tales. Julian stared at me. You're not going to confront her? I shook my head. What's the point? She'll just lie better next time. He took another drag of his cigarette. I can't believe I was so stupid. I wanted to tell him he wasn't stupid. That loneliness makes smart people do dumb things. That hope is a hell of a drug when you've been without it for too long. But instead I just sat there with him, 2 middle-aged men on a beach in the Philippines, watching the sun, set on our shared delusion while somewhere behind us, a 25-year-old woman counted the money we'd sent her and planned her next move. I packed my bag at 3 in the morning, quietly, methodically, like I was preparing for a business trip instead of running away from my own broken heart. The resort was silent, except for the ocean and the hum of air conditioners. I'd barely slept since my conversation with Julian. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with him, speaking French, rubbing sunscreen on his shoulders, while I sat alone in my room counting the cost of my stupidity. $11,400. 13 months of daily conversations. A year of believing I was special, chosen, loved. All of it built on lies I'd been too desperate to question. I'd prepaid for 3 more nights, but I couldn't stay. Couldn't risk running into them again in the lobby or at breakfast, or on the beach, where they'd probably moved on from fighting to making up. I left the key cards on the dresser and slipped out through the emergency exit by the pool. The night air was warm and heavy with the smell of frangipani flowers. Beautiful. Everything about this place was beautiful except the memories I was making here. I walked to the main road and flagged down a tricycle driver who was heading to the port. Ferry terminal, I said. He nodded and didn't ask questions. Maybe he'd seen this before too. Maybe heartbroken tourists leaving in the middle of the night was more common than I thought. The first ferry to Puerto Princesa left at 5:30. I bought a ticket and sat in the waiting area with backpackers and locals and other people who had somewhere else they needed to be. My phone buzzed around 4. A text from Miri. Russell baby, I just realized you didn't come to dinner tonight. Are you okay? I stared at that message for 10 minutes. She just realized. After spending 2 days with another man, after telling me I was being dramatic, after letting him sit on the bed I'd paid for while she explained why he understood her better than me, she just realized I wasn't okay. I turned off my phone without responding. The ferry ride back to Puerto Princesa took 6 hours. I spent most of it on the upper deck, watching islands pass by, and trying to figure out how I'd become the kind of man who falls in love with strangers on the internet. The other passengers looked happy, excited to be island hopping in paradise. Couples taking selfies, families sharing snacks, solo travelers reading books and looking content with their own company. I envied them all. Their certainty, their joy, their ability to be in one of the most beautiful places on earth without feeling like they were drowning in their own poor judgment. My phone came back to life when we docked. 7 missed calls from Neri, 12 text messages. Russell, where are you? Sir, Julian told me you talked to him. Please let me explain. Russell baby, you are scaring me. Please call me back. I can explain everything if you just give me a chance. Please don't leave without saying goodbye. But I was already gone. I'd said goodbye to her months ago. I just hadn't known it yet. When I started believing that love could be bought with Western Union transfers and good intentions. When I let loneliness make me stupid enough to think a 25-year-old woman halfway around the world was sitting by her phone every night, waiting to tell an old man from Iowa how much he meant to her. I blocked her number while waiting for my flight to Manila. Then I blocked her on the messaging app where we'd met. Then I deleted the app entirely. Clean break. No looking back. No second chances for either of us to hurt each other again. The boarding announcement for my flight home echoed through the terminal in 3 languages: English, Filipino, and something else I didn't recognize. Maybe French. I thought about Julian, wondering if he was still in Palawan or if he'd left too. Wondering if Neri was alone now, or if she had a third phone with a third man lined up to comfort her. Wondering if she would cry when she realized we were both gone, or if she'd just start making new plans with new money from new lonely hearts who hadn't learned yet that some things are too good to be true. I've been back in Des Moines for 3 months now. The house feels the same as when I left, but I'm different. Smaller somehow. Like part of me stayed in that hotel lobby, holding wilted flowers and learning what betrayal tastes like. I don't use dating apps anymore. Don't scroll through language learning platforms or international chat rooms. My phone doesn't buzz with good morning messages or late night voice calls from women who call me baby and make me feel needed. The silence should feel peaceful, but mostly it just feels empty. Different from the loneliness I felt before Neri, but lonelier in its own way. Like I used up my quota of hope for this lifetime and now I'm just waiting for the credits to roll. My kids still don't know what happened. They call every weekend like they always have, asking about my week, my health, my plans for the holidays. "You sound tired, Dad," my daughter said last Sunday. "Are you getting out enough? Meeting people?" I told her I was fine, just adjusting to retirement. She offered to visit for Thanksgiving. I said yes because seeing her grandkids always makes me remember there are good things in the world, even if I'm not sure I deserve them anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell her about Neri. About the money, the lies, the trip that became a nightmare. But what would be the point? She'd either feel sorry for me or angry at me, and neither would change what happened. I still get ads for Philippine resorts in my email, booking confirmations that never got canceled, travel deals to places I'll never see again. I should unsubscribe, but I don't. Maybe because they remind me that I'm capable of making terrible decisions, and terrible decisions are at least decisions. For 13 months, I felt like I was living instead of just existing. Even if it was built on lies, even if it cost me more than money, even if it ended with me walking through a ferry terminal at dawn like some character in a sad song about middle-aged men who should have known better. I was awake during those months, present, hopeful, stupid, yes, but also alive in a way I hadn't been since my divorce. Some nights, usually when it's raining, and the house feels especially quiet, I open my laptop and look at her old messages. Not because I miss her exactly, but because I miss the version of myself who believed her. The man who thought love could happen to anyone at any age if they were just brave enough to reach for it. That man was an idiot, but he was also optimistic in a way I'll never be again. He thought the world was full of possibilities instead of pitfalls. He thought loneliness was a problem that could be solved instead of a condition to be managed. He thought 13 months of daily conversations meant something more than 13 months of successful deception. I'm not angry at Neri anymore. Anger requires energy I don't have. I'm not even angry at myself, though maybe I should be. I'm just tired. Tired of being the kind of person who falls for voice messages and filtered photos and promises that sound too good to be true but feel so good to believe. Tired of wanting love more than I want truth. Tired of being 66 years old and still learning lessons I should have mastered decades ago. The hardest part isn't the money, though $11,400 would have bought a lot of peace of mind. The hardest part is knowing that every sweet word she said to me, she probably said to someone else. That every "I love you, Russell baby," was just part of her routine. That I wasn't special or chosen or worthy of the kind of love I thought I was receiving. I was just another lonely man with a Western Union account and a desperate need to feel important to someone, anyone, even if that someone was lying about everything from her last name to her feelings. I wonder sometimes if Julian stayed in Palawan or if he left too. If he learned the same lesson I did about the difference between being loved and being useful. If he's sitting in some cafe in France right now, looking at his bank statements and wondering how he became the kind of man who sends money to strangers on the internet. Maybe we should start a support group. Middle-aged men who fell in love with women young enough to be their daughters and smart enough to take advantage of hearts that had been lonely too long. We could meet once a week and share our stories and try to convince each other that we're not pathetic, just human. But I won't do that because admitting what happened would require explaining why it happened, and I'm not ready to face that conversation yet. Not with strangers, not with friends, not with family, and definitely not with myself. Some mistakes are too embarrassing to share, even when sharing might help you heal. Some shame is too heavy to carry, but too personal to put down. Some things you pay for once, like plane tickets to paradise and flowers that die in hotel lobbies. Others, you carry forever, like the knowledge that you wanted love so badly you were willing to believe any story that came wrapped in the right voice and the right promises and the right amount of attention. The rain is starting to hit my windows harder now, and somewhere in the Philippines, it's probably morning. Neri might be waking up next to someone new, someone who doesn't know yet that he's paying for the privilege of being lied to with exquisite tenderness. Or maybe she's alone, counting the money she collected from men like Julian and me, planning her next trip to the next island with the next stranger who thinks he's saving her when really she's the one doing the saving. Saving herself from poverty by selling dreams to people wealthy enough to afford them and stupid enough to believe them. I hope she's happy, wherever she is, whatever she's doing. I hope the money bought her something real, something lasting, something better than the temporary comfort she gave me during those 13 months when I thought I mattered to someone. I hope Julian found his way home too, and I hope he's smarter about love the second time around. I hope I am too, if there is a second time. But right now, sitting here in my empty house in Iowa, listening to rain that sounds like all the tears I never cried over a woman who never existed the way I needed her to, I can't imagine trusting anyone enough to try again. Some things you pay for once, others you carry forever. And some nights, when the loneliness gets loud enough to drown out common sense, you can't tell the difference between the two.